In 2007, Frank stumbles onto the compound of paranoid survivalist Bill, who takes him in and eventually begins a relationship with him. As their relationship grows more committed, Frank contacts Tess over the radio and the couples enter a tenuous friendship. In the present, Frank is crippled by an undisclosed condition and asks Bill to euthanize him after they marry. But Bill, satisfied with the life he has made, kills himself as well. Joel and Ellie arrive shortly after, stopping at one of Joel's hideouts beforehand, where Ellie encounters a trapped infected and slowly kills it after studying it. They discover a letter left for Joel by Bill, where he tells him that protecting Frank is what gave his life meaning after the outbreak and finds that he left them his truck and supply of weapons. Joel decides to go looking for Tommy and invites Ellie to join him. Thanks for stopping by the Search T channel. I am Search T, and that is the synopsis of episode 3 of The Last of Us entitled Long, Long Time. And speaking of the long, long time, that actually is in reference to the song by Linda Ronstadt. At the end of the episode, Ellie finds a tape and they put it in the tape player in the truck that was left to them by Frank, or Bill, I should say. And that was the name of the song. And this episode really was quite poignant, very emotional. And I step aside, from the crazy world of Lost of Us, the Last of Us, I should say, the Lost of Us, the Last of Us, and we don't have to deal with the clickers in this one. We dealt with one infected that Ellie studied and wasn't even phased to the point of she just stabs it in the head. She cuts it, looks at the whatever's coming out of the infected's head, and then she just stabs it in the head and she puts it out of its misery. But it deviates from all that and kind of goes to the world of a paranoid survivalist known as Bill. Bill pretty much hates the world. He doesn't care about people. And when Frank comes into his world, he's suspicious. Bill is. And why wouldn't he? You know. But they fall in love, and we see their relationship grow over like 13 years, something like that. I mean, they go 3 years first, right? Later, they're arguing. You think it's a major argument, but they're just arguing about something that's so simple, like stuff like that. Frank, Bill, yeah, Frank wants to invite people over. We invite friends over. Bill's like, we don't have friends, and then he wants to be able to take care of a couple of buildings there, the boutique, and what else, the wine shop, and that. And it's just like, oh, that's what they're arguing about. Like, it's really it's pretty funny, and I really really like their relationship. At first, it was just like, they're just two guys that met each other, and a lot of uneasiness there. And then Frank pretty much is the one that made the first move. I don't know if Bill was, you know, gay in the sense that did he what was his his what's that his what's the word, but what was his, like, thinking about that type of, you know those type of people, right? Like, he asked him before they made love, like, have you ever done this before? And Bill's like, with a girl. But maybe in the back of his mind, maybe deep down he was attracted to men. And if not, then Frank was able to convince him to, you know, take it for a spin, take a shot. And what happens when he let himself open to Frank? He ends up finding a partner, a life partner, someone he loves, and that's a beautiful thing to find that, especially in their world. I mean, how often are you gonna have someone come along and you know do that? Even in the world we live in, where there's no outbreak, there's no pandemic. I mean, well, there's a pandemic, but I mean, there's no like end of the world situation, and we still sometimes some of us can't find somebody, and he finds the one person, and that person ends up being the love of his life. I mean, 10 years later, which is a sad thing, he's Frank is now wheelchair bound. I mean, this was like after, like during the time after the 3 years after these raiders come, right? This is after Joel had paid him a visit. This was like Joel and Tess at the time. Tess was still alive, and he pretty much says that you're not gonna get no infected coming in here. They're not gonna be able to get through, but you're gonna be visited by raiders. And he was telling him straight up that I have some fortified steel that I can give you to make, because he said pretty much says your fence is not gonna last. So you need that because although the infected can't get through, the raiders can. And when it does happen, and they're able to fend them off, but Bill, like Frank, gets woken. All these explosions, all this screaming, all this commotion. He's yelling for Bill. He goes out there. Bill's out in the open shooting at the raiders. I'm thinking, why isn't he like taking cover or ducking or anything like that? And he even tells Frank to get back inside, and he gets shot. The side, a pretty good shot, and he's even at one point when Frank's putting pressure on Bill's wound, and Bill is like this. He's just giving himself up to the situation. It's like he's telling him what to tell Joel and all this stuff like that. He's willing to just let go and just die. And then 10 years later, apparently, obviously he survives that. But then we see Frank with an undisclosed condition, definitely cancer. I mean, he even talked about how, Frank Bill's like, hey, let's go. You might find a doctor. You might find somebody. And then Frank's like, well, even before the outbreak and all that stuff, there was no cure for it. So I don't know what he would be else would you talking about but cancer. I mean, we pretty much have cures for a lot of things, but cancer is still in the thing where in a position right now where there's still no cure. But this story, it's just one of those things where it's like I love the fact that it actually made sense. It actually kind of there's a connection between those two characters, especially Bill and Joel and Tess. And the last thing that he thought about Bill before he died was that he's going to write a letter to Joel, which Ellie reads, leaves all of his guns and supplies and everything to them. Take as much as you want. They even get a truck. At first, he was like, because he opened up the trunk, Joel did, and I'm like, oh man, there's no battery. And then he looks at the refrigerator, opens it up, and there it is. And then he has to charge it for a few hours, so they hang out, they take showers. I like Ellie because Ellie goes, I'm gonna take a shower, and she looks at Joel and he goes, you especially, and she has that like, ugh, like as if to say, yeah, you really need it, And I was thinking, hey, I'm sure you need it too, there, Ellie, but. But isn't that a great thing? It's like when The Walking Dead, when everybody went to that place, kind of like the CDC of that show, and they were able to take showers and all that stuff. I mean, it's something that we take for granted now, but what if one day that happens where we're not having no access to that, But yeah, and what's what I like about it. I mean, I like there's a thing where you read the inside the episode, and Neil Druckmann is talking about how the Frank thing. It could have been the other guy too, the other producer, the other showrunner, and they're talking about how Frank was already dead in the video game, and they wanted to be able to just explore another version of that. And I'm glad they did because it actually shows. Because I guess in the video game, um, you know, he's already without Frank and he's on his own or something like that. And it's good to show this because what it does is basically shows what Frank means to him. What is the relationship between the two? Like, what is what's the connection there? You just see him in the video game, he's dead already, Frank, and like going, okay, so how does he factor into his life? What did he bring to Bill's world? And we see through here. And he even said in a comment that he was afraid that there's going to be some people that are going to not like this. They'll be mad at this. Yeah, that's gonna happen. People are very, very particular about their video games, and even the ones that are being uh, adapted into a movie or a TV series. And you know and it's justifiable because you don't want people to tamper with it. This show does deviate from video game here and there, but it actually makes sense and it actually connects the characters and it does move the story in a different direction, but at the same time not deviating too far from it. Like I read something that these guys are going to deviate some they're going to do changes, but it's going to enhance the story, to enhance the the whole you know thing, the whole storyline, the whole everything that has to do with The Last of Us. They're not going to try to change it in the sense that it's going to make no sense. It's going to be like, why are characters doing this? You don't do this in the video game. You know, why is the character like this? Isn't he different? They're going to definitely stay true to it. And I like the fact that they got Neil Druckmann, who is the, creator, director of the video game. So he can definitely give his 2 cents, his 3 cents, 4 cents, 5 cents, however many cents. He can give his all of his output into it, or input, I should say. And I really, really like the direction of this show. I like how it's going, and how they can take a sideline story that does have connection to the main plot, but it definitely connects to Joel and Ellie, Joel and Tess when Tess was alive. The one thing that was really, really poignant, but yet at the same time, it actually kind of makes you sad because Ellie was reading and she says, and to protect, the letter from Bill, and he was pretty much saying, use everything you can, all this things you have to protect yourself and protect Tess. And she didn't say it, and then she didn't say Tess's name, and then Joel picks up the letter and reads it, and then he sees the letter out. He walks outside because he has to just because that was his love, that was his partner. And then he goes outside and he crumples the letter and just throws it down. And then he tells her later on, "Hey, don't ever bring up Tess. Don't ever bring up either one of us. Just not bring up our past. Just pretty much he just wants to move forward, get Ellie to Boston, get there, and basically they're gonna just move on because it's gonna slow them down. It's gonna make them not focus on the mission, on the what got them together really. Like the next episode, they show preview, and you see Joel, having it out, duking it out, fighting some other people, and like that, and don't know what that is, don't know who they are. Could be some raiders, could be someone else. I mean, there's a woman, a lady, now that shows there, and I did read like characters, like I go to the Wikipedia, I read the letter, the characters and who plays them, and then Ellie, she has an, I think her name is Annie, and that's the mother of Ellie, so I think maybe that's her. We'll see. But like I said, that pretty much is my recap of the show. Hope I didn't forget anything, but I basically pretty much talked about what the focus of this episode was, and that is the origin of Bill and Frank, because it was mentioned by Joel in the beginning. Even Ellie said, "Are they nice people?" And then I think he said something like Bill is, or I think he said Frank is, or something like that. But he had one of them. Maybe it's Frank because Frank is the nice one out of the both. Because Bill is a curmudgeon. He's a rough kind of grumpy guy, but we saw his soft side come out when it came to Frank. Frank brought that out, and that was a beautiful story, beautiful love story between the two. I enjoyed it. I really, really did like this episode just because of that. I like the fact that it kind of take us away from the craziness and the stressfulness of the situation they're in, where they had to battle infected, and then all these other offshoot groups like that include the Raiders and all that stuff. Even though we saw that, during the time with Bill and Frank, Bill gets almost mortally wounded. He got out of that 10 years later, but then he loses the love of his life. They decide to get married, and the one thing about it is that he said, "Crush all this with this medicine, with this poison, whatever that. Put it in my wine, I'll drink it. You take me to my room, you hold me tight, and I'll die in your arms." And then he decides that he's going to do the same thing, Bill, because he's already content. Everything that's happened to his life ever since Frank came into his life, he's lived his life that he wants and he's content, and he decides to kill himself as well, and that's love. You know, people show their love in different ways, and to die with somebody, even though you're healthy, that's something. That's something. That's something to think about, and that's something to pretty much really just admire. I guess because that takes a lot of guts and courage to do that. And it goes to show you that how much Bill really did love Frank, and it's a good thing. But anyway, that's my video, my recap and thoughts on episode 3 of The Last of Us, entitled Long, a Long Time. A very good episode, but I think that the next episode is going to go back to the action and the stress and intensity and all that stuff of all the craziness that's happening with the outbreak and the raiders and all these other people and the infected and whatever else is gonna take place. But anyway, that's my video. So for those of you who stopped by and checked it out, I appreciate it. And in closing, as always, take care.